Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Stitch Sessions. If you are watching this tutorial, you are looking to learn how to create your own pocket inside your Camel Stitch cardigan. So this was just the last tutorial that we've worked on. Some of you opted not to do the pocket, which is fine. I gave you guys that option. And for those of you that were interested in adding a pocket, this tutorial is all about how to actually create the pocket. So I talked a little bit about how to create the slit for your pocket in the previous tutorial because this cardigan was done lengthwise. So as we stitched back and forth, we made sure to leave a number of chains across, and then we continued on. This gave us our opening, so you can see the opening right there. And so in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to actually create the inside of the pocket, which you can see I've done on this side here. Nice little pocket, and how to attach it, okay? And if you're curious about this cardigan, you can just click on the link for it in the description box down below, and it'll be all set up for you to start working on your very own Camel Stitch cardigan. I just love how it came out. So it's got this beautiful little collared edge here, along with the sleeves, and we are ready to rock. So all the materials I used for this, in case you're wondering, is in that previous tutorial. For this one, just to kind of recap, the hook I'm using for this project is a 6mm hook, also known as a size J or a 10. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to begin by placing a slip knot on our hook. And then you want to find the very first stitch. So of course I'm right-handed, so I'm working from right to left. So I am doing I'm beginning with my right front panel with the right side facing up. Okay, so that's important to differentiate there. So you're just going to insert your hook into that very first stitch, and you are going to slip stitch to join, just like that. Now if you want here, you can work over your tails as you go, or you can weave them in later. It's totally up to you. Just for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to leave those tails down there so it doesn't confuse anybody. So I will continue on in the pattern that we've been doing, which is the camel stitch design. So I'm going to chain one here. I'm going to go back into the same stitch and do one double crochet. And this is a little bit different than what I was doing before, where we were chaining two. But I just want to create a little bit more snugged stitch. So there we've got our first one. And then we're going to do our second one into the full stitch. So generally we always do the first two stitches into the regular spot. And now because we want to continue to create this rib here, we need to go into the back loops only in this row. So we're just going to insert our hook and find the back loop there. And do a half double crochet. Now this actually, on this panel, this is actually my foundation chain row. So it might be a little bit tricky to find that back loop, but you just want to turn your work over and do the best that you can and just find those loops. This would actually probably be your back bump here, and you're probably going to have to help it along, and that's okay. And that's basically it. So you're just going to place one half double crochet into the back bump or the back loops of each stitch. Okay, so I have stitched all the way up to my stitch marker, and for me, for the length of my cardigan, I ended up stitching up 25 stitches. This is important to remember because you want to do the exact same thing on the other side, okay? So you want to know how many stitches from the bottom that you did on one side, and that's how you should mark the other side. So just place stitch markers there, then once you get there, you won't have to count. Okay, so now we want to create an opening from this stitch marker to the next stitch marker. So I said that I had skipped 24 stitches. This includes where the 2 stitch markers are. So we are now going to chain 24 stitches. Now you want to really be careful here that you don't do it too tightly, because we are going to need to work into these stitches later on. So really keep them nice and relaxed. Not too loose, but not too tight. So chain 24. Okay, I've got my 24 chains here. It looks something like that. And what I'm going to do now is where that stitch marker was, that very first one meaning I measured 16 inches from the top of the cardigan to here. This is where I'm going to place my next stitch. Okay, so I am going to place a half double crochet into the stitch where I had the stitch marker. Okay, so it is going to be a half double, and I am going to work into those back bumps like I've been doing all along. And I am going to have to help it through a little bit. Right there. Okay, make sure this doesn't get twisted here, which it's wont to do. And you're going to pull through all of these loops, pull through and pull through this one. So it can be a little confusing, but just pull through all of them. And there is your pocket hole. Now it doesn't seem like much right now, but this is going to be the opening for your pockets, okay? And so now you would just continue on as you've been doing before, placing 1 half double crochet into the back loops or back bumps all the way around. And just a little note too, I didn't do it with you, but where I had the stitch markers here, and I mentioned this just a few minutes ago, make sure you, once you establish where the one pocket is, go right away to the other panel and do the exact same thing. So now that you've got stitches to work with, you can count the number of stitches from the bottom to the top. And so for me, I have 25, so I would go on this side now and count 25 stitches from the bottom here. I'd place 1 stitch marker here, then count 24 stitches and place the other stitch marker there. This will guarantee that your pockets are placed symmetrically based on the number of stitches you have. And of course, we want to make sure that you have the same number of stitches on both panels, which at this point you should. Okay? Okay, I've got my 24 chains. Now I'm going to find that next stitch marker, and while it's in there, I'm going to place my next half double crochet into the back loop here. Actually, I need to take it out after all. Okay, so we're going to go into that back loop so that we maintain, whoops, right there. So that we maintain our camel stitch look. Pull through all the way. This part is the funkiest part. There we go. So now we have our other pocket opening. Whoops, I didn't go all the way through. And now we just continue on to placing 1 half double crochet until the end. And then you have completed your first round or row, because we're not going into full circles, of creating the pocket and extending our side panels. Okay, so here we are at our first sleeve opening. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to work into those chains that we created. Okay, so first I want to make sure that it's not twisted. So I want to work in through the tops of these V's here. So I'll yarn over, and again, just try to find the top of the stitch. See how it sits? It runs smoothly here. So I know that's the top. And I want to work into the tops of those stitches. And that will be really important once we start doing the inside of the pocket later on. Okay, so I'm going to go in through that chain. Usually the first one's kind of the trickier one, and then the others will be a little bit easier. You just pull through. Okay, half double crochet into the next chain. And don't worry in the beginning, your loops are going to stretch out and you're going to think, oh my goodness, this is going wrong. It is not. It is totally normal. Okay, so just going into each chain. I'm going to do a few here. Insert. And this is why, exactly why, you didn't want to chain these too tightly. You also don't want them to be too loose either, but okay, I'm going to do one more here. Just so you guys can see. So there you have it. Okay, so now you will have an official opening, and now you'll be able, in future rows, you'll have proper stitches to work into. Just like that, okay? So now I can set you off to finish your panel. So you just kind of finish off your chain, continue around, go around your neck collar here, and then down the other side. And you'll do the same thing in the other pocket. Okay, go to the end, turn your work, etc., etc. So I don't have to repeat that again. You guys know by now what to do. So then you'll finish kind of thickening up your panels to a little bit, to the width that you are happy with. And then I'm going to meet back up with you to talk about how to actually, once you've got your panel done, you're happy with the opening, how to actually create the pouch for your pocket. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about how the pocket comes together. So I've already done one on this side, which when you're wearing it, this is considered your right side pocket. But of course, as we look at it, it is our left side. So what you want to do, or what we're basically going to be doing, is just building up the little sack for our pocket on the inside here. Okay, so you're going to start around the edge and you're going to work in the round until you have the depth that you desire. So I would recommend going as far as where your collar sits, and that way you can actually stitch it nicely together. Now you don't actually have to stitch the edging to your collar, but I like the idea of having the pocket sit nice and flat and steady in the same spot. So that way when it sits flat, you can't really tell where it is. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you how to do it on this side. It will be the mirror image on the other side. It's pretty easy. So I'm going to take you through that right now. So we're going to take our yarn. Okay. And what you want to do is you just want to place a slip knot on your hook. Just like that. And what you want to do is for each pocket, you want to begin on the outside edge, on the side that's closest to the outside edge. So if you're wearing your cardigan, the edge closest to the outside would be here. So the edge closest to the outside on this side would be here. And that's where I began this pocket here. So that's where we're going to start here. And I'm going to start right in this top corner here. And you actually do want to work on it with your right side facing out. Okay. And I mean, at the end of the day, it won't really matter because you're going to put it inside out anyway, but it will just make it much easier to follow along. And this is how many people do their pockets. So what we want to do is just find that first stitch just kind of out of the corner here. And we just want to slip stitch to join. And what I'm going to do is I am just going to go into the back loops here for this first row, just because I want to kind of maintain that little ribbed effect here. And just this first row is going to be different than all the others, and then you'll see why in a second. And that's why I want to maintain that ribbed effect. So I'm just going to slip stitch to join, just like that. And then I'm going to chain 1 and go right back into the same stitch and do 1 half double crochet into that stitch. Okay. And now I want to do that all the way across until I get to the other little end of the pocket here. So I'm going to yarn over, find the back loop of that stitch, which is right there. And I just want to place a half double crochet. You're going to do that all the way across, pretty straightforward. This is 25 and 26. So I had left 26 stitches open for my slit here. Okay, so I've now done 26 half double crochets across. This first row will be kind of an extra row, so we're not even going to count this after this. This is just going to give us a little bit of give to create our fold over once we turn this pocket inside out. You might not realize that yet. It might not make sense yet, but you will see how it's going to come into play in a moment. So what we're going to do now, once you reach kind of the edge here, that corner, what we want to do is you're just going to take your hook out, and I'm just going to turn my sleeve around, or my little sleeve open, sorry, not sleeve, my pocket opening. And what I want to do is I want to come across here and find the corresponding stitch, which is going to be right about there. And I'm just going to pull this loop through. There's many different ways of doing this, but this just kind of cinches it nicely. It's kind of like a decrease, and it just smooths out that little kind of corner seam there. And then once you do that, you're going to chain 1. And now we're going to work back across these stitches. And then we'll continue on. So on this side, on the outer edge, you're always going to have 1 extra row. And like I said, it'll make it a little easier once you turn it inside out to just have a little bit of extra give there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stitch regularly. I'm not going to worry anymore about going into the back loops because now I'm working on the actual inside of the pocket. So I have chained 1. I'm going to go right back into that first stitch here, and I'm going to half double crochet back across. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue on here, and I'm going to meet back up with you when you've gotten back across to your 26 half double crochets, and then I'm just going to talk you through how to continue on and build up the depth for your pocket. Okay, and here I am back again. This is stitch number 25, and back into that top of first stitch, that's 26. So now you've got definitely kind of a flap coming out of that slit there. And now we've come around to the top edge here, or the seam where the edges meet. So we're going to do something similar to what we did before. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to continue on now. We're just going to find, so this is the bottom here of where we started. We slip stitch for our first row. We're just going to ignore that and go into the very next stitch to continue along here. Now, I can tell this is where I did my chains, so it might be a little bit kind of tighter to find, but I can see that my first chain stitch is right about there. Now, depending on your particular project, you're just curious about how to create pockets in general. Your pocket may be deeper or shallower than mine, or longer in opening. So if you don't have 26 stitches, don't fret. You might have 30, you might have 15. This is just an example, the basic structure of how to create an easy pocket, okay? So I've gone ahead and kind of joined to that stitch there, and I'm going to continue on with my half double crochets. So there should be another 26 stitches on this side, and that's going to give me a total of 52 stitches all the way around. So from now on, we're going to do 52 stitches in the round. However, in a traditional round, once you get back to the beginning, you would slip stitch, chain 1, and continue on. Now, because we want our seam to stay fairly straight, even though it's on the inside, and keep it steady. What we're going to do is once we reach the end of the round and we slip stitch, we're going to turn our work. So our rounds are going to be worked one way, then we're going to turn, work it back around, turn, work it back around. Of course, we'll chain one every time. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this side here, and I'll meet back up with here just to kind of solidify that, and then you guys will be off to the races. But I'll see you back here shortly. Continue on with your half double crochets. Okay, so I just have done my last stitch here. Now this stitch, which looks like a stitch, actually belongs to where we originally slip stitched. So I'm going to skip over that, and I'm going to find the very first stitch I did here in this previous round, or in this current round I should say, and I'm going to slip stitch to join this round all together, and I'm going to chain one. Okay, now instead of just continuing in the round this way, I'm actually going to turn my work. It's getting to be quite a lot to turn here. And so now I'm going to work backward where I came from. So now it should be pretty easy to just continue on. You're going to do 52 stitches all the way around. So again, after I've chained one, I'm going to go right back into that very first stitch, and I'm going to half double crochet just into each regular stitch, and I'm going to continue going all the way around for 52 stitches. I'm going to go around here. I'm going to continue on. So now I've got stitches to work into. I just continue, and when I come back up to here, I will slip stitch, chain one, turn around, and then come back this way. Slip stitch, chain one, turn around, and come back this way. Pretty straightforward. Now, for the depth of my pocket in this particular cardigan, I did this for 14 rounds. And the reason why it was 14 rounds is because that's the number of rows it took me to get from the edge of the slit all the way to just the beginning of the collared edge here. I do not want to go past this ribbing because I will be attaching the edge of my sleeve just right about there. So depending on how many rows of a gap you have between the slit of your pocket and the actual edge, you may need more or less rows. So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to set you loose now because it's pretty straightforward. You're just going to keep going for the number of rounds you need to create your depth, the depth of your pocket. And then I'll meet back up with you when you've done that, and we'll talk about closing off the bottom of our pocket and seaming it down to the inner lining, down to the inside. Okay, so I have done a total of 15 rows for my pocket, okay? Now, again, with the, I know I say this a lot, with the roving yarn, one pocket may use more or less rows than another, and it's just because, again, it changes texture. But I used 15 rows, so I've got the depth that I need, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn it inside out. So I want to seal up the bottom from the inside. So that's the inside of the cardigan, and I'm just going to lay this flat so you can see. Okay, so when we fold it over nice and flat, the edge of the bottom of the seam just sits nicely just where that ribbing is about to begin, and that's perfect for me. So if you look at this first pocket I did here, when you lay it flat, that's exactly where it sits. So I seamed up the bottom, and then I just whip stitched it together so that it sits kind of comfortably there. Now, some people wouldn't necessarily seam it to the collar, but I just find that it sits much more uniform, and when you see it from the front, it's just nice and even. You've got this little pocket there. Okay, so to seam up the bottom of our pocket is very easy. We are now just going to slip stitch across. Now, of course, as always, you can certainly whip stitch this if you want, but I find that the slip stitch method is pretty easy. So what we're going to do is we're just going to line up all of our stitches the front row to the back row. So you can see there the stitches line up nicely. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to insert my hook in through one of the front loops and I'm going to match it up to the one right behind it. So when I fold it nicely there, I just follow along and find the corresponding stitch just like that. And I'm going to slip stitch to close it. And then the very next one, insert again and slip stitch. I'll do that one more time. Insert, whoops, make sure you haven't worked into that one yet. Insert and slip stitch. So you can see it's getting seamed up nicely. Okay, so that's what you're going to do all the way to the end here. And before you fasten off, make sure you leave a long tail because we're going to use this tail to then sew it to the edge of the collar, and then we're pretty much done. Okay, so I always recommend kind of running a length of about 3 times the length of what you need. Sometimes I even do 4 depending on what I'm doing. So totally up to you. Okay, so that's it. Just go ahead and slip stitch to the end, leave a long tail, and I'll meet back up with you very shortly. Just doing my very last slip stitch. There we go. Okay, so that's seamed in nicely. And now getting a good length. And now we're ready, whoops, to sew our seam, our bottom seam to our collar. So now if I just turn this over, now you can see you've got this little pocket here. See, and it sits nicely. Pretty neat, huh? Okay, one more step. We're going to seam the bottom end here to our collar to sit nicely. Okay, so now you may want to pin this down if you are feeling a little bit uncertain about it or if you're a little bit newer to doing this. I'm pretty comfortable with eyeballing it myself. First thing you want to do is take your trusty darning needle here and thread it through. Okay, and now what we want to do is just lay this flat and see where the seam falls naturally. Okay, so we want to make sure there's no ripples or anything like that. Okay, so it's just sitting perfectly just where it starts to kind of begin the ribbing row. So I'm just going to gingerly pick this up, and what I want to do is I just want to start picking up a couple of loops from the bottom here. This is where the collar is, and then just feed it through the bottom of the seam. Now the goal here is not to have any stitching showing on the other side, okay? Now if you were doing this all one solid color, it really wouldn't matter because it would all just get buried in there, but because this one changes colors, I want to make sure it's not too obvious. So now I'm just going to basically go right about there. This is the bottom of one of the posts. Just going to pick up a couple loops and then feed it through there. So I always like to have at least 2 loops, as you can see. And for me, I just find that gives me a little bit of extra fortification, as I like to say. Okay, and then I just move it along here. Maybe this time I'm going to dig under here and pick up those 2 loops there. So I want it to be nice and secure. I don't want to do it overly tight because I don't want my work to bunch. Okay, and then I'm going to pick up these loops here. Oops. Okay, and then up through here. So whip stitching, pretty straightforward. I'm basically going from the bottom up, and I keep looping it all the way around, and every couple of stitches I just turn it over to make sure it's not coming through the other side, and I'm very happy with that. Okay, super easy, guys. So I'm going to set you loose to just finish that off, and I will meet back with you when you've finished your pocket and you are complete. So obviously, if you're doing this tutorial, you've already done the full-on cardigan and you are finally finished. Super exciting. So you will have something that looks like that. Nice pocket, sits securely on the inside. And you are ready to go. Put your Camel Stitch cardigan on. So on that note, I will leave you there, guys. Have a wonderful time putting on the last finishing touches to your cardigan. And I hope you'll join me for more crochet tutorials. Remember, if you haven't pressed that subscribe button, go ahead and do so and click the notification bell so you'll stay up to date every time I upload a new tutorial, which is every Wednesday morning. And check us out on our website, which is crochetcrafty.com. We've got a monthly newsletter. We've also got interactive online classes where you can actually interact back and forth with me. You can show me your work. The classes are nice and cozy and they're super fun. And it's a great way to stay connected. All right, my crochet friends, that's all for now. Have a wonderful day. Take very good care. Happy crocheting, and I'll see you next time.